Clemson, Kentucky, Alabama. 3 of Georgia's first games are very serious, and they are 3 of the 4 of them they can lose all of them. Now, will they? I mean, I don't think so. Dean Leggy, Matt DeBerry. We're going to talk about how this is going to get Georgia ready for the big moments at the end of the season. Matt, you don't, you're not working your way into this season. You're going straight into the deep end for Georgia this fall.
Yeah, I think you could put Clemson and Kentucky on the same level.
Universe.
I think they're above average teams that Georgia should have their way with. Uh, I don't know which quarterback is better, Brock Vandagriff or Cade Klubnik, but I think they're decent. They're not bad. I still believe Brock Vandagriff could be a good quarterback in that system. But you're not starting off with East Tennessee State Tech, right? And I think that's good for the team when they've got a team like Clemson that, I'll ask you, Dean, used to be a rival. Can't be a rival. They don't play every year, but that's as close to a lot of people look at them as a rival. And they came ready to play. At least the defense did in 21 when they had Clemson to kick the year off. But it's exciting. And I think it's exciting for the players. Last year they started off with 2 cupcakes. I think 3 out of the 4 were cupcakes. And this year's different, and you're going to have to play Clemson in Atlanta. So somewhat of a home game. It's not Athens, but it's tough to beat Georgia in Atlanta if you're not Alabama. But then going to Lexington, that's a place that it's harder to play than people think. That is a tough game. They give Georgia everything they have in Lexington, and it's always a game they say every year, at least Kirby does. They leave that game with bruises when they go up there. It's not going to be freezing cold as it was last time, which is nice, but it's not a cupcake. So you get those 2, and then it's the big game in Tuscaloosa. And if they play well, I think you could attribute them playing Clemson and Kentucky beforehand. That's going to get them ready for this game. Game.
I want to just put this on the screen from Dawg Post. I love this schedule, by the way, and we're going to get to the bottom of the page soon. But, you open with Clemson. It's a noon game. I think that it's not a noon game in Athens is probably good. But it is a noon game. And you got at Kentucky and Alabama. That right there, in terms of emotion, there's going to be very few games that aren't Ohio State that will elicit emotion the way that Alabama will for this Georgia team. Then, Matt, you go into Auburn State, Texas, and Florida. Those are all winnable games. At Texas is difficult. And then you close the season at Ole Miss with Tennessee and Athens, UMass and Georgia Tech. And then you're going to deal with an SEC championship game in theory. We'll see. Where Georgia has no losses or a loss, and that'll be in Atlanta. And then, whether you win that game or not, you're going to proceed by hosting a first round game. I was going to call it a quarterfinal. It's not a quarterfinal. You're going to host a first round game, or you're going to go straight to the quarterfinals. I know they'd rather just go straight to the quarterfinals, but at some time, man, they're going to have a moment where they got to be ready. This schedule prepares them for that completely. I mean, they've got everything they need here, man. You're playing on the road at Alabama. Before that, you're playing on the road at Kentucky, which is getting you ready for on the road at Alabama. You're playing Clemson to open the season. Not a rivalry, but a big game. Then you've got Auburn at home before you go to Texas. You've got the Gators the week before you go to Ole Miss. The Ole Miss game, now that I look at this, is looking a little bit more like you better be paying attention. But it might be that they're already, where they need to be at that point in the season, and you handle Florida. Florida is not what it used to be, clearly. I just think you've got to be ready for the big moments. And for Carson, the offensive line, etc., you've got a big mix of road games. There's going to be no situation besides those road games, Matt, where Georgia's not going to have the home crowd or the more than 50% of the crowd. I mean, look at you got Clemson in Atlanta. That's going to be 60%, 70% Georgia folks. Kentucky, no. Alabama, no. Texas, no. Ole Miss, no. But everything else, every other game is, every other game's either in Jacksonville or it's in Athens, or it's at the SEC championship game. And then after that, You could play in Atlanta again at the Beach Bowl. So there's so many. I will admit what I just said might not be exactly accurate. I don't know the exact order of the quarterfinals, but if you're the one seed and you want to play, in terms of logistically closer to your place, I believe that would be the Peach Bowl for Georgia, and they'd certainly have the home advantage there.
Yeah, I guess it depends on what else happens. But if Georgia loses 2 games,
Yeah,
would they be in a position to host that first round?
man,
I
I
think
probably think they would be actually, just off the top of my head. I mean, so the ACC will get a quarterfinal, which is ridiculous. But and so will the Big 12. So you're taking away 2 spots that are not necessarily the best 4 teams. If Georgia were to have 2 losses, let's say they lose to Alabama and Texas, I would imagine they would still be the 8 seed with some of the other games on their schedule. I mean, they would be dealing with a win over Ole Miss, a win over, I would imagine, Kentucky, Auburn, Florida, Clemson. And if Clemson wins the ACC, or if they're the 2, you know, so I would imagine they would still, I would imagine they would still host, but it wouldn't be a certainty. It wouldn't be a certainty. Because
would should Georgia get credit for beating Texas on the road, Ole Miss on the road, Alabama at home, or is it's Georgia? They should have. They should get credit for winning these big away games like other teams would. But I don't know if people would look at it as, well, Georgia was the favorite to win that game. So yeah, they
right.
they beat Alabama and Tuscaloosa, but they should have.
Well,
Uh,
first,
you know,
yeah, I'm sorry, Matt. First of all, you have to look at all these schedules and see who's going to be eating losses when. Alabama's got a close of the season that's at Oklahoma and playing Auburn. They also play LSU and Georgia. They are not winning all of those games. I would imagine that the most difficult games of the 2 are LSU and Georgia. They should beat Oklahoma and Auburn. But my point is, Alabama very well could have 2 losses. Clemson's schedule's not the end of the world. They've got Florida State on the road and Georgia and Atlanta. They should lose both those games. I don't know if I trust Florida State, but okay. So you're starting to talk about, you look a lot across the breadth of the land, and Ohio State's got a pretty easy schedule. But whoever wins the Big Ten is going to get that. Whoever the runner up is will get a home game. If Georgia's the 3 in the SEC, I think that they would probably still host. And if they don't, they'd be going to the 8. They'd be the 9 seed. And listen, man, I went through that entire mental exercise. Georgia's not been below the 8 before the playoffs since 2016. So they're going to host a game. And they've only lost 2 regular season games once in Kirby's time since 2017, which was 2020 when they went to Alabama and lost to Florida. So they're the notion that they would lose 2 games in the regular season, I don't know. But are you suggesting they could lose a regular season and then lose in the SEC championship game? That's totally possible.
well, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because Ole Miss should be really good. Will they do a classic Ole Miss and not live up to those expectations? Sure. Could they be better than what we think? Probably not, because people
No.
think they're a top 6 team, right?
Who
So
are these people, by the way?
the Twitters and the internets and
Now, are we
experts.
talking about Twitter porn or just regular Twitter?
Regular. I did see that was going on a little bit, but
Uh,
Texas is going to be really good. I think Texas is
yeah.
probably the 3rd best team heading into the season,
Who's the second
behind
best?
Ohio State. I think is
Oh,
better
oh,
than
oh, oh!
Texas.
You don't mean in the league? Okay, gotcha.
Right. In the league, yeah, I would say they're number 2, and I think Tennessee is a team that people are forgetting about, and I get it, makes sense, but I think they'll be better than they were last year. Probably won't be as good as they were 2 years ago when somehow they made it all the way to number 1 in the country before getting curb stopped by Georgia and Athens. But
And South
uh,
Carolina.
and South Carolina. But I think at their peak, their best, they could be a top 5 team in the SEC. That wouldn't,
Tennessee?
yeah,
Yeah.
top
But
5. Depending on what LSU does in Missouri, people completely forget about Missouri, and
yeah.
I expect Alabama to be there, but
Let
who
me say this,
knows?
dude. Let me just say this. This is a tough. Alabama's got a brutal schedule, man. They go to Wisconsin. They play Georgia, Tennessee on the road, They play Missouri at home. They play LSU, and then they close with Oklahoma and Auburn. They could lose those games. They're not going to lose to Wisconsin. They're not going to lose to Auburn, I don't think. But Missouri can beat them. I mean, and then you look at like LSU. They play SC to open the season. They host UCLA. They've got Ole Miss in Baton Rouge. They got A&M in College Station, Alabama, Florida, and Oklahoma to close. Ole Miss, they got to play Kentucky. It's not a great matchup for them, but LSU, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Georgia, Florida, and State to close. Texas is the one that has the easiest schedule in terms of the SEC, but they play Michigan on the road, and then they play Michigan on the road, and then things light up for them in October. Week off, Oklahoma and Red River rivalry. Then they host Georgia. That's brutal. And then they host Florida. They go to Arkansas, which I would be very concerned about. I wouldn't be nervous about, be concerned about it. They host Kentucky and A&M. I mean, they should win all 4 of those games at the end. That's going to be a challenging schedule for Texas.
Yeah.
And that's the easy one.
Yeah. And we're forgetting a lot of teams. I say forget. They just don't matter right now. South Carolina doesn't matter right now. Auburn doesn't matter. Texas A&M still doesn't matter. And obviously Florida could be going backwards.
But I will say
again.
this for Texas A&M. They get to host Notre Dame week 1. They are a slight favorite in that game, which is kind of like, are they? But they are. I mean, according to FanDuel, they are a very slight favorite to win that game. They are. Where did it go? They are 1.5 point favorite to win that game. Now it's at home. So I just think when you start looking at how can we, what will you need to be ready for? Georgia's season will prepare them for big moments in the fall, Matt. And I think we're going to all be ready to watch it starting in August. Thanks for watching.